Welcome to Contracting Conversations. My name is Scott Williams, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Jim Valley. Before we get started today, I want to remind you where our podcast can be found. We're on DAU Media, we're on Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you're enjoying our content, please subscribe and hit that like button. This really helps us continue to provide future podcasts like the one we're doing today. Okay, today our conversation is with Kevin White. Kevin is a professor of contract management for DAU. He's currently on rotation working with the Combating Trafficking in Persons, or CTIP program. Kevin's been an active duty Air Force contracting officer and has conducted numerous COR training classes while on active duty, and also as a civilian instructor here at DAU. Hey, Kevin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you both for this opportunity to talk about CTIP and its very important role for our CORs and our contracting folks as they perform their everyday work out in the acquisition field.
All right, Kevin. Hey, thanks for coming on the show. Your experience is going to be very valuable to those out there. And I know DAU right now, if anybody doesn't know, we do a rotation every 5 years for all of our folks so they can get re-blued, re-green, see what it's like out there in the field and bring it back into the classroom and into our mission assistance and teaching efforts. So, Kevin, you're in CTIP. So can you talk about CTIP and the role the COR plays in this very important topic?
Well, the CTIP is, as we said there earlier, is combating trafficking in persons, but it's basically a modern day slavery, which involves the exploitation of people through force, fraud, or coercion for labor and even possibly sex trafficking. Okay. But it really doesn't matter. Victims can be of any race, gender, nationality. And as you probably know, DoD has adopted a zero tolerance policy. So it's definitely important that we as acquisition professionals get out there in front of this and make sure we understand what we're looking for, what to do if we do find it.
Okay, can you tell us about your rotation and why it was important for you to do this with CTIP?
Well, as we said earlier there, I've been retired out of the military. I was in the Air Force and deployed many times. So my wife is from the Philippines. We've been married 32 years, and we've talked about this throughout my career of how the third world country people have been treated overseas and in these deployments and stuff. When I would come back, I would talk to her about it. So I've always had a passion for it or thinking about it. But since I've retired, I've moved out to a very small community. So it's kind of, I've forgotten how important it is. Or how, I live in such a small community, we don't even lock our doors and everything. So you kind of feel complacent and you forget how big of an issue that this is worldwide. So when I got the opportunity to go on to this rotation with the Combating Trafficking in Persons Program Management Office, I jumped at the chance. It was a great opportunity for me. And what this PMO does is they oversee, develop, and provide tools for DoD acquisition professionals to be able to combat, make sure, be able to identify and know how to react if we do get it, if we do see something.
All right, Kevin. So in your past deployments, because I know you've been out there, especially overseas, do you have any experience with trafficking?
Well, as I was prior enlisted in the military as an enlisted airman in the 90s, CTIP we didn't even really think about it. We didn't talk about it or wasn't really aware. It was kind of in Rome, do as the Romans do type thing. But I remember an incident when I was in Saudi Arabia and I was talking to a couple of the TCNs as third country nationals. And they were telling me that the Saudis had taken their passports and were making them work off basically their debt for transportation to and from and that kind of stuff there. So I really thought that stuck with me a lot of years afterwards. And then later on in 2004, when I was a contracting officer in Kuwait, I had all the northern camps there. And there was a lot of stuff going on still that was a little bit it was out there, I thought. Like I'd see TCNs, 10, 15 of them in these small little Toyota pickups riding in the back of a truck out to the middle of the desert and filling sandbags all day long for $2 a day, so they weren't getting paid the proper wage at the time. So it's just one of those, that I've seen a few things throughout the past, but we've definitely read a lot since then.
Right. And when I was over there in '06, I saw some things, and I'm hoping things have gotten better now that the education is out there, and hopefully this podcast will get it out there so they can take the CTIP training and learn more about it, and hopefully help to make sure this doesn't happen as much anyway.
Well, it is, Jim, and thank you for that. I think that we are definitely leaps and bounds ahead of when you and I were talking about there. Like the CTIP PMO under Miss Linda Dixon here, they have done a wonderful job putting these websites together, which I'll talk about that later, but it will provide a link at the bottom. But they've done a wonderful job getting the information out there, these training tools for CORs, acquisition professionals, to be able to identify, to know, okay, what do we do? I think this is wrong. What do I do now? Who do I notify? So everyone needs to definitely go out there and look at that site, especially before you deploy.
Yeah, that's really good information, Kevin and Jim. Good points. Hey, speaking of the COR, what is the role of the COR in CTIP?
Well, that's a great question, Scott. So it's our main duties as CORs, is observe, communicate, and document. And this falls right under the CTIP, okay? Big picture, we need to understand our contract, okay? We need to understand the clauses that we have in there. But then we fall back on what's our requirement, and then once we're going to observe them doing it, but we need to broaden our observation, not only look at our requirement, but look at our surrounding areas, look at our contractors, look at the subcontractors, look at the employees, and make sure that if we observe something, that we communicate it immediately, whether it be to the authorities, obviously the contracting officer. If you're on contract, that's our first line of defense is the contracting officer. But sometimes we can run into stuff out there such as rape and physical abuse and stuff like that may entail reaching out to authority. Okay, so obviously we're going to go ahead and talk to the contracting officer, but we may need to interact with other agencies to make sure we, are communicating it to the proper folks. But the main thing, see something, say something. And then with everything that we do, we know we've got to document. We definitely want to make sure we document what happened, when it happened, what we've seen. And it's one of those things, if you smell smoke, you probably got a fire. There's probably an issue. Either way, if you feel that there's a problem, you sense there's a problem, bring it up and let's talk about it. Let's bring it out, and let's talk about it with the contracting officer, legal. We have a ton of folks that we can reach back to, but I think the most important part is the actual identification of it and the communication of it. And then we would definitely require any kind of documentation to go forward with it.
Thanks, Kevin. So, I'm sure people listening right now are thinking, well, okay, that's great, Kevin. I'm confused. I don't even know what to look for. So what are some early warning signs of human trafficking?
And Jim, that's a great question. Now I've become a big cheerleader for the CTIP PMO now, okay? And so every time I get a chance, I'm going to be a guest speaker in a COR class next week, and any opportunity I get to talk about CTIP, I jump on it. But so a lot of these questions come up. Well, Kevin, how do I know? Well, you can look at it with any kind of physical abuse, bruises, burns, anything like that would be an obvious way. Okay, but other things, signs that we need to look at are like poor working conditions, restricting or guarding of movement, the confiscation of identification or the passports or ID cards or anything like that should be a definite flyer. And then, non-payment, underpayment of wages, and then, any kind of isolation from other employees or the local community. These would all be warning signs. And like I said, here's the thing. If you think something's wrong, first thing I would do definitely is before you deploy, make sure you go to the CTIP website. Again, it's be provided below. And make sure that you look at all these questions. It's like when I would deploy, I would try to think about, okay, what am I going to face over here? What's our contract types? We're going to be using BPAs, delivery orders. What are we looking at? and then trying to smarten up on that. Well, the way CTIP is now, and it should have been throughout, my career, I would definitely be looking at that. I would visit this site and field play this out. Okay, what if I do see something? What am I going to do? And as a COR, our easiest and always fallback is contact the contracting officer. Okay. And your contracting officer will know to discuss it with legal authorities. And again, sometimes we have to call in police officers or CID, OSI, legal. No, depending on the situation that we're looking at. But overall, again, to fall back on that, if you see something, say something. Immediate is what we try to do there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Hey, Kevin, I think you covered some of this in that last segment, but you've got these warning signs to look at. So what should a COR do if they identify some of these signs? I know you mentioned talking to the contracting officer. Is there anything else they can do?
Well, again, and I keep pushing this training, the CTIP training site, they have done a wonderful job. We see training sites and training material all the time. But like I said, Miss Dixon and her group have done an outstanding job putting together tools, guides, checklists on there for you to be able to do that. But so again, I would just remember those 3 rules of observe, communicate, document. Observe, keep your eyes open for any red flags that we discussed earlier. Communicate, keep an open line with your supervisors, contracting officers, anybody out there that is available to you. Keep it open and discuss it immediately. But and again, with this is that documentation. Make sure you get those dates, times, specific incidents, and that we have everything in line and to move forward with it.
Great, thanks, Kevin.
All right, Kevin. So here I'm a COR. So I'm pretending I'm a COR here. So how can I enhance my role in CTIP?
Well, as we're, I think the biggest thing is to understand your role in the entire acquisition process. Okay, is a big thing. Is like the COR is the one that's out on the job site. They're the ones that's out there. To me, it's the first line of defense. Okay, for not only our acquisition but for CTIP. You're the one that's going to be there looking at the employees, talking to the employees, and you need to keep that open, that open line for easy interaction. And then just be aware of it is the main thing. And to know that we are going to react very seriously and have your back and move on this a lot more than, like Jim, you and I were talking about during our hours, we didn't even discuss it. And now we are discussing it, okay, without question. So we definitely need to be as trained as we can before we get there. Go to the website, take your CTIP training, and get there. But then once you're there, then you're going to do your regular site visits, observe your workers. Again, talk to them. Make sure that you are aware of any kind of potential warning signs. Okay, we're going to look at the contractors' documentations thoroughly, look at their payrolls, their recordings, timesheets, and look at any kind of labor issues that we may have, labor laws in that country, and then overall ethical standards, making sure that everybody's treated appropriately. Okay, but another thing, I know I mentioned this earlier, is that promote open communication. Okay, be professional. Make sure that the workers can understand that they can talk to you without fear of retaliation. Okay. But again, overall is immediate response to the contracting officer, law enforcement, or any of the other stakeholders, shareholders there. And also be able to reach back to the CTIP website to grab resources, to have that best practices and look at best practices for combating in trafficking there.
Very good, Kevin. So going over that really quickly, what are some of those challenges and best practices that we talked about here?
Well, since I've been in contact with Kuwait because we're trying to plan a trip over there right now, so I've been talking to a few of the CORs, and as with any deployment that I've ever heard about, our biggest constraints are limited resources, time, personnel, budget. There's more work than we got time to do. Okay, so we've got to be careful that we don't let CTIP fall off to the wayside. We have to make sure it's an alligator in our pond, that we've got it, that it is serious, and that we could very easily have something going on our installation. So we've definitely got to keep on that. Okay. We can also, as CORs, run into contractors who resist compliance and conceal violations from us. So we definitely want to be able to lean forward and identify that and talk to our KOs if we need to. If we need that extra push for any reason from the contracting officer, to bring that to ours. And then as always, just maintain our training, make sure we understand the CTIP policies and procedures, and that we're doing our part to be able to do it.
Great. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Hey, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about CTIP. I can't tell you from my experience how important this subject is.
You bet. And thank you, Jim and Scott, for having me on. And like I said, just one more push for the CTIP website, which will be down below. There's an acquisition training part of it that they've done. Like I said, they've done an outstanding job. And if you have any questions, please direct them to me or Miss Linda Dixon and her outstanding team. And thank you again for this opportunity.
All right, Kevin, we can definitely put yours and Miss Dixon's email address below also, if you like. All right. Well, that's all for today, everybody. If you have time, please do us a favor, like this video, because it will help us, hopefully get permission to do future videos, because, resources are short. And so we got to look at what gives us the biggest bang for our buck. But if you can, subscribe to our podcast, either on YouTube, DAU Media, or Apple Podcasts. And we look forward to having future contracting conversations with you.